This is May 25th, 1983, and we are at 1203 North Sycamore in Creston, Iowa, in the dining room, and we are going to interview Emily Esther Rubillard Ritter about a little bit of the Rubillard family history and the Ritter family history. So we will start, I guess, with Mom and get some information about her.
Well, Mom was born on a farm in Gardner, Wisconsin in October 1900. My parents, of course, were farmers, and there was a large family. I was the ninth child of the family. I had 5 brothers and 3 sisters. And of course I was the baby of the family, and as I said, my parents were farmers, and the day I was born, the Thrashers were at our house. My mother had a very good neighbor who came to be with her when her baby was born. And throughout the morning, Mother and Mrs. Simon had prepared dinner for the men.
Go.
I attended grade school. We had to walk 2 miles to school, a little country school. And of course, we went across the field a lot of times to shortcut. And in the wintertime, the snow was so deep, we'd cover the fences and we'd be walking over the fences. And when the weather was real bad, sometimes my brothers or my father came after us. And I graduated from the 8th grade, and from then on I was really a housekeeper and helped on the farm. In about 1920, I had an older sister that lived in Milwaukee and was working there, and I visited her, and I liked it so well that I stayed there and got a job as a waitress. First I worked for the telephone company, but I didn't like it, so I went and I had a better job as a waitress. And I met my husband shortly after that, Arthur Elman Ritter. He was from Afton, Iowa, and he had been to Milwaukee to visit his brother Charlie, who was a streetcar conductor. And of course Art was a farmer too, but he didn't want to farm, so he just stayed there and became a streetcar conductor. And we were married November 24th, 1921, by a Baptist minister in Milwaukee. And we wanted to go to my parents in Wisconsin for our honeymoon, but since the weather wouldn't allow us time to go, we went to Green Bay to visit a brother of mine and his family. And we were there several days, and then of course we both had to come back to Milwaukee to our jobs. And 5 years later we had our firstborn.
Could we go back to your childhood a little bit? And you told me you were born in a log cabin.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
The first log cabin my parents had was rather small, and was just a 1-story. And of course, as the family grew, why, they had to have a larger house, and so they built a rather large 2-story log cabin. And I was born in that log cabin. And when I was quite young, they built another house, a better house, more modern. And when they moved from the log house to the better house, they said I was in a cupboard. I moved in a cupboard. And I didn't like the new house, and in the evening I would come home to the log cabin.
What did your parents do for a living now?
Now, they were farmers, grain farmers, and they raised a lot of dairy cattle. And I learned to milk a cow when I was very young. And I was quite robust, and my older sister was rather on the delicate side. So I really worked a lot at a tender age. And I learned to milk cows and garden and pick fruit when I was 14 years old, and I was really on my own as far as spending money and clothes is concerned. We picked cherries and apples.
Your dad did some fishing?
Yes, he did quite a little ice fishing in the wintertime. Well, he used to bring home the nicest catch of fish, and he would clean them and salt them down, and then he had a smokehouse, and he smoked the fish, which was very delicious. Shortly after we were married, he sent us a bunch of fish, and my husband enjoyed them so much. And in the summertime, they didn't do much fishing. They really didn't have much time. And of course, that required a boat and a lot of equipment, but ice fishing was his hobby in the wintertime. They had a little shanty or cabin, we call it shanty, made out of canvas, heavy canvas, with a little stove, and they'd dig a hole in the ice and put the stove over that. The cabin over that. And of course, that way they kept warm. And it was really quite a thing to see all those little shanties on the lake in the wintertime, just a little village of shanties. And of course, towards spring it was treacherous because the ice would get quite soft and sometimes just separate and almost drown some of the men. But then too, during the wintertime they would haul hay and grain across the bay into Menominee, Michigan, where they had a much better price and better market for their products. And of course, that was by horses on big sleds, and I can always remember hearing the jingle of the bells, when they were coming home.
So we take a little break and have some tea?
Sure.
Okay.
How am I doing so far?
Very good, except you're really.
Okay, you're on.
Okay. Well, we want to know a little bit more about your parents, where they came from, and why they came to Brussels.
My mother was born in Belgium, and there were about 3 or 4 children, and she came. Her parents were quite well-to-do, but they were just very annoyed of the turmoil in Europe all the time, and they just felt they wanted to get away from it. They had to billet, they call it, a soldier in their home, and whenever they were asked to, and really a lot of their liberties were limited, So they came to America. I can't tell you the year, but my mother was 10 and a half years old, and she remembers the trip very well. And of course, they settled in Wisconsin. I don't know whether they had relatives around there or not, but I remember her brother. She had one brother, older than she was, and they were farmers.
Do you know what her full name?
Grandparents.
You know what her full name was, including her maiden name?
Her maiden name was Mutkin. My grandmother's name. That is my mother's.
And her first name?
Dolphine.
Dolphine.
Dolphine Mutkin. And her brother's name Desiree. Desiree?
Desiree?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I remember when he died, of course he died of cancer, he died a horrible death. And I went over with my mother to that house where they lived. We stayed there. And of course, my parents are buried in the Brussels Catholic Cemetery, which is a very nice cemetery, isn't it, Jerry?
Mm-hmm.
Well
We've been
kept.
there.
You've been there.
Mm-hmm.
Well kept, and my mother was Catholic, of course, and my dad was Episcopalian. And of course, there was an Episcopalian just about a mile and a half or 2 miles from where we lived on the farm. So we children were brought up Episcopalians and made our first communion and confirmation in the Episcopal Church and baptized.
What area was your father from in Canada? He was French Canadian?
Yes.
Do you know?
did know, but right now I can't think of it.
I think it was near Hamilton, Ontario.
Hamilton, Ontario?
Yeah, you're right, Jerry.
Okay,
What was his full
and his
name?
full name, his last name really wasn't Rubelard,
No.
was it?
No, his name was Robior, R-O-B-E-Y-O-R, something on that order. And his parents, I guess, had 6 or 7 children when they came over here. And of course, they changed the name, that is, it changed to Rubelard.
Do you know why they came from Canada to
No,
the United States?
no, I really don't know
I
why.
don't either.
Of course, you see, at that time, there was a lot of land unclaimed. You know what I mean, just ready to be settled.
Right.
And it could be that they were looking for a tract of land.
Mhm.
And you know, those people used to like to live where there was a lot of woods, so they had plenty of fuel. And you know,
Didn't your mom and dad make shingles, you said?
yes, my mom and dad settled on a 40-acre tract of land that was mostly trees, woods, and they built a little log cabin and start clearing the land off, cutting the trees and cultivating the land to make a garden and to raise food. And of course, in the winter time, there wasn't much for them to do, but they used to make shingles. They said cedar shingles, and they'd bundle them up, and that was what they had, the money that they used to buy their food. And my mother said that syrup, bread and syrup, was what they had at least one meal a day. They probably had meat if they went out to hunt or something, or fish, they had fish. And so they weren't really too bad off, you know. But as they cleared the land, why they start raising more as stuff to eat, and a cow and some hogs and chicken, and they progressed that way, and they ended up with 120 acres of land.
And they were fairly well off
Yes, they were, but
through the years they accumulated.
unfortunately, they lost a lot of money in banks. 2 banks went bankrupt, and I think if they hadn't had some money in a 3rd bank or something, they'd been penniless, because the banks never paid back. That was lost, their money was lost. I remember Mother saying that when she'd go by a bank, she'd just shiver. You know, it bothered her so much.
Have we talked at all about your grandparents? Do you remember anything about them, their names or anything like that?
Well, my grandfather, Rubelard, was Louis Rubelard, and my grandmother was Militia, or something on that order. And I remember visiting them in a little log cabin after they retired. And my granddad was quite a woodsman. He thought an axe was about the best instrument in the world, and he always had an axe or 2, very sharp axe. And his request was that when he was buried, he would be buried with an axe beside him, which was granted him. And he died in the summertime, remember, very hot. And in those days, they didn't embalm people. And I remember the funeral was, the casket had to be out on the porch and outside. And of course, in those days, the casket just had a little square glass to view the face. They were so different than they are nowadays. And of course, then my grandmother came to live with us for a while. And she had another daughter that she lived with. And of course, my brother Jerry, my uncle Jerry, would come and visit us. He was a barber in Kewanee, Wisconsin. And of course, my grandmother really died penniless. She was too generous with her money. She'd give it away. And of course, my dad paid all her funeral expenses. She could have had a county burial, but my dad wouldn't have it. So she had a nice funeral burial. And of course, that's about Oh, I remember she used to tell us she couldn't understand English. And she wanted us to speak French, you know. She was quite an old lady. We loved her very much.
And could you speak French?
With some. We got to so that we'd speak some, but we want her to speak English.
Okay.
Am I talking too much?
No, that's fine. What about your father's parents then? That was your mother's parents?
I'm talking about my father's
That
parents.
was your father's
See,
parents?
my mother's parents, I never knew them.
I see.
And they were farmers. They had bought a nice farm. And that's where Dad went to court my mother, you know.
Where was that at?
That was in Gardner, you know.
Township?
Yeah. And you had to go 5 miles on foot. And at that time there was so much woods, you know, there was just a road going through the woods, you know, and then woods on both sides. I remember after my dad saying that he'd go through those woods and boy, he'd hear all kinds of noises, you know. Just as though horses coming, prances down on him, you know, and things like that. But it was a natural noise of the woods, you know what I mean.
And weren't there wolves?
Oh yes, there was wolves and there was also some bears. So there was danger, and there was, you know, you had your fears, you know, about going out at night that way. But he didn't have any transportation.
It was wild country then.
It was wild country in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to go pick blackberries, and we were always scared of bears, because they like berries too, you know. And we picked a lot of blackberries, and that was really primitive country, you know.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall the names of either your grandparents on your mother's side, the father or the mother?
I don't hear
But their last name was Mutkin.
Mutkin. Oh yeah, I said Desiree no, Desiree was the son. No, I don't know that and see, that was so long ago, they died quite young too. They weren't very old, in their 60s.
Mm-hmm. Do you know when your mother was born, what year? Okay.
I think I should have a record someplace.
Yeah.
The picture that I have on my desk, that Glennie gave me of my dad and mother, probably has that in the back of it.
Okay. Why don't I just look back there and see if I can find that.
I think it's on the dressing table, Jerry. See, Glennie went through all this history.
Yes.
She knows history very large.
And she wrote it down and sent you a record.
Yeah, I've got some.
You wrote out a record for me too.
Yeah, I've got a record. I ought to look that up.
Yeah, I
Give a
don't know
little
where it is.
Statistics.
On the back there.
Okay. I'll read this from the back of this thing. It says Frank Roublard was born October 31st, 1854 and died February 28th, 1934. He married Dolphine, D-O-L-P-H-I-N-E, Mutkin, M-O-T-Q-U-I-N, on March 3rd, 1878. Dolphine Mutkin was born on September 15th, 1862, and died on March 23rd, 1945. And this particular picture was taken in August of 1932. And Mom, if you would hold that up just about like that, I'm going to see if I can zero in on that and try and get a picture of that.
That looks pretty good.
Not too bad. Not too bad. Maybe, Dolores, if you could bring it a little bit closer, and then I'll refocus it, and we'll get... Okay, that looks about it. Now I'll refocus. I have to take it back just a little bit. Just a little bit more. There. That's good. That's about as good a picture as we can take. I think we got a real good picture of that. That's good.
It's like
Okay.
Grandma has a nice apron on.
Right. Right. Okay. Very good. Should we take another break?
Yeah, she hasn't drunk her tea.
Okay.
Oh, we're going okay. Okay.
Well, I'd like to tell you about my brothers and sisters. I had 5 brothers, I mentioned before. Arthur was the oldest one, and Ed was second, and Alfred was third, and Willie was fourth, and Nelson was fifth. The brothers were born all one right after the other, and of course our sixth child then was a girl, Agnes, and then Laura, then Xena May, the third, and of course Emily Esther. And they were more or less all farmers and married local girls, and you know. Of course, I'm the last living Rubelard of the family. They've all gone on before me, and I have nieces and nephews in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and some in Green Bay, and also Neenah, Wisconsin. How long ago we went to Wisconsin, Laura? 6 years ago?
It must be 5 or 6 years.
Well, 6 years ago, my daughter and I made a trip to Wisconsin and visit as many relatives as we could.
Except one in a nursing home. I didn't like. We had a good time though.
You have a sister-in-law still alive?
I still have a sister-in-law alive, and she's about 90 years old, and she's still living all alone, but she has very good grandchildren and a son who looks after her every day. But she walks around with 2 canes, and she corresponds with me. I get long newsy letters about once in 2 or 3 months, and so that's the only relative, that close relative.
And her name is?
Anna.
Anna, and she was married to?
To Nelson, my youngest brother.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Nelson's the brother who took over your parents' dairy farm.
Yes, my parents sold their farm to Nelson, my youngest brother. They had 2 sets of building on the farm, so my parents moved in one house that they had on the highway, and of course I was their residence as long as they were alive.
When we were up there, and that's been about 10 years ago, the log cabin was still there.
That was 13 years ago. It was the
13
summer
years ago.
after my husband died, you know. That was
That's right.
1970.
That's right.
The log cabin was still there. They used it as a machine shed then, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And of course, Herbert is Nelson's only son. He bought the old home place, you know, from Herbert. No, from Nelson.
Mm-hmm. Did we say when you were born?
October 19th, 1900.
1900. Okay. Okay, do we want to talk a little bit about you and Dad now?
Well, I think she had said that she went to Milwaukee and Dad had gone to Milwaukee to visit a brother. She had gone to visit a sister, and they both ended up working there. And didn't you live in the same rooming house or nearby?
No, we did it with nearby.
Nearby.
A girl that I knew that I worked with introduced me to Art. She was living in the same rooming house where he was. And on a Sunday afternoon, she had me come over there. And of course, Dad was very interested in records, you know, and came over with a bunch of records, and we played records, and asked me for a date, and so on and so forth.
That was when Milwaukee was considerably smaller and nicer than it is today.
I believe it is, Of course, there's always a lot of factories and the beer joint of the world, you might say.
Lots of Germans living there,
And Polish people.
Polish.
We had some very good Polish friends.
And the streetcar was the big method of transportation.
Yeah, my husband was a streetcar conductor until we moved to Creston in 1929. And he had an oil station built. We bought a lot, and he had an oil station built. And he was in the oil business until 1959. He sold his business and retired. Of course, in the meantime, Delores had gone to Iowa State University and had graduated and met her husband there.
But let's get back to Milwaukee. Before you came to Creston, I was born in Milwaukee.
Yes.
The
Delores was
first one.
born May 24th, 1926 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And she was 3.5 years old when we moved to Creston.
What amazes me is that was during the Depression, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, there's much depression or not.
Well, 1929 was the stock market crash, but
Yeah.
actually the Depression came a little later, didn't it?
Yeah.
Businesses weren't
Mhm.
sagging as much as the stock market. That was all back east, I think. And I remember moving, I remember we lived on Elm Street first, didn't we?
Yes, right,
We rented a house on Elm Street, and then we rented a house across the street from where we are today.
Mhm.
And I remember that Dad said we were doing so well that we could build a house. And you had the land, didn't you? Just north of the location of the filling station.
And then when did you move into the house?
We moved in the house February 1st, 1932. And,
Well, that was rather a sad occasion because we had just returned from Wisconsin.
yes, I had lost a sister in Wisconsin, and it was a bitter cold winter, and we had gone to Wisconsin, and my brother-in-law's car, Charlie Ritter, he had a better car than we did, and he let us use it. And I remember skidding on ice, it was terrible. And of course, a good friend of ours had kept a fire going in the house here, and the house was ready to move in. And we moved a bed and a cot, and we all three slept together.
I remember, it was a big thrill.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we moved in here then, and I'm still in here.
Right. Right.
51
years later.
Yeah. And I don't want to talk about myself.
Why not?
Sure.
Well, I want to talk about my two boys.
Oh, sure.
I had two sons. After 10 years, Dee Dee was
9.
Was 9. Well, our first son was born, Ronald Lee Ritter, in 1935.
34.
No,
Oh,
35.
Yeah.
Mhm. And of course, we were very thrilled of having a son. And of course, a year later, we were thrilled again by having a second son, Gerald Eugene Ritter.
The big surprise.
The big surprise of it all.
Well, I'd been alone for a long time.
Mhm. And of course, Delores helped me with the babies, and we got along very well. Ronald enlisted in the Army right after high school, and he went to Germany. He wasn't 19 yet, or very young. He didn't want to go to college right then. He thought he had to serve in the Army sometime. He'd serve right away. And of course, he was in Germany, and Jerry attended Ames University. Iowa State University at Ames for 4.5 years, or 5 years.
You went to junior college first.
Well, yeah, he attended junior college here in Creston, and then he transferred to Ames.
Well, I went away to school too.
Oh,
Of course,
yes.
I went away when the boys were still young. And I went to New York City for 2 years to Barnard College. And then I transferred to the University of Iowa. I really preferred to be closer to home and living in a dorm and experiencing college at its best instead of being a commuter. And I met my husband at the University of Iowa also. And I graduated and stayed on another year, got a master's degree, and then got married that summer. And I think my brothers were ushers at our wedding.
Right.
They were still sort of squirts. But this little house has seen a lot of traffic.
A lot of going on. 2 boys born.
They were born in this house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's cut it off for a while.
Yeah.
Okay.
It looks like I'm looking down all the time.
Maybe I ought to get in the picture here just a little bit to introduce. Now we have my son, James Allen Ritter, with his grandmother, and they're going to do a little talking right now. Okay?
Now see, I was born a couple of days after you. That's right.
The 21st of October, 1960.
And I guess I wasn't the most healthy baby in the world when I was born. Or I didn't look that good. I was kind of a small one, if I heard right. But I seem to have made it through till now. And I remember a little bit of Grandpa. I remember going fishing all the time. Used to be my big thing, coming out here and going fishing with Grandpa. I still remember that. Still like to fish. And remember the ponds that we used to go to all the time. Stanley, right?
Mm-hmm. Stanley Ritter.
Stanley Ritter. Used to go there. He had a couple ponds.
You got a degree, Jim.
Recently completed my Bachelor of Arts degree, University of Nebraska in Omaha, and I'm going on for my master's degree there at the same place in communications, and hoping to maybe go into the field of public relations or into some kind of communications, writing, whatever I can possibly do. Maybe nothing.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Now, where's the script?
Okay. Do you want to get the other daughters in?
I'll laugh too bad.
Go on, come on. I want to get you in also.
We want you in. This is record for
Jenny?
many, many years, you know.
Progeny. Progeny will follow this.
Okay.
Don't shoot them now.
Get a close-up here on Janet. Yeah.
She takes very well, doesn't she?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Some of us are photogenic and some of us aren't, like me.
I
Uh-huh.
don't take a good picture of them.
Okay. Janet was born in 1968 on March 27th.
What do you want me to do?
Can you get right down there by Grandma's feet?
Probably.
And Jim was born on October 21st, 1960.
Right.
And by the way, a little bit of trivia, you know, we all were born the year of the rat. Mother and you and I were all born the Chinese year of the rat. So, and then we have the second daughter, and this is Jenny. Jenny's been asleep, so Jenny a little bit sleepy there. Jenny was born on August 8th, 1960. So, 1966, right? 8866. Right. So this is all my clan here. Okay. I gotta switch eyes. I got my contacts on and I can't tell. Okay, you all say cheese and we'll record this for posterity. Cheese. Okay.
If you get over there, I'll take your picture.
Okay.
You don't mind?
No.
Trying to get, this is so perfect and, you know.
Let's see. Where can I?
That's good.
Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna focus on Jenny and everybody will be around her. Good.
Okay.
All right.
Worked out real good. Good enough. I think that will, do you want in there just a little bit, Dolores, and then that
You
will
wanna talk to
complete
me?
our recording. Do you want me to take a
Sure.
picture?
It's all ready. As soon as that light's on,
Okay.
I think it'll...
The little red button. And I focus on,
Jenny's a good, I think, or maybe Janet this time. I think the camera's
okay,
a little in the way, but maybe not bad.
that's all right. So I got Janet.
Gee, that a nice smile, girl.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I sure hope those turn out. If I can't take pictures with that camera, I'm gonna give up. Yeah, you're there.
I'm in the picture,
Uh-huh.
okay. This is Saturday, May 28th. And I brought over some information, a little bit on the Ritter side of the family tree. And I need one other thing here. And the information I have here is as a result of an application by my father's sister, Clara Ritter Foss, to the Daughters of the American Revolution for a membership, and it's national number 146060, in which she goes through some genealogy to prove that she had a relative in the Revolutionary War. So that gives us a little bit of family history here. So I'll start by talking about my dad, Arthur Ritter, Elvin Ritter, was born in Afton, Iowa on May 15th, 1894, was married on November 24th, 1921 in Milwaukee, and died on May 10th, 1970. And his father was Andrew Jackson Ritter, who was born in 1849, married in 1884, and died, do you recall when he died?
He died in the Granddad Ritter?
Yes.
He died in January, but it's a long time ago. Didi was a little baby. We lived in Milwaukee. We lived in Milwaukee, and the weather was very bad, so I didn't plan, Dad and I didn't plan on I going.
Yeah.
But he and his brother, who lived in Rock Island, met, and they drove to his dad's funeral.
Must have been about 1928,
Yeah. It'd
Yes.
have to be between 26 and 29, wouldn't it?
because there are pictures of him holding me when I was a baby, so that must have been the year before,
Yeah.
1927 maybe.
Yeah.
About January
Yeah.
1928.
That reminds me, we have a picture somewhere of all the four grandparents, don't we?
Yes.
Remember you showed me that? I'll
Yeah.
have to get that on camera too. That's an interesting picture. Okay, and he married Mahala Longshore, who was born in 1864. And do you know when she died? It was after World War II. It was
Oh,
like
yes,
early
uh-huh.
50s.
Yeah, I think it was about 1950,
Yeah.
September 1950.
Okay. My problem is that this thing was, the application was 1919, so problem there. Okay. Then what we do is we go down Mahala Longshore's line, because that's the basis for this going back to the Revolutionary War. Mahala's parents were Thomas Longshore, who was born in 1836, married in 1863, and died in 1892. And his wife was Jane Gardner, who was born in 1836, and again, I don't have her date of death, so it must have been after 1919.
Oh, yes, it was after 1929. It was after, it was in the early 30s that she died,
Early 30s.
because we were living here when she died.
Okay. Okay, and her parents were Michael Gardner, who was born in 1800 and died in 1880, and her mother was Mahala Newlin, N-E-W-L-I-N, was born in 1811 and died in 1846. And then Michael Gardner's parents were John Gardner, who was born in 1751 and died in 1817, and Christina Law, and it's spelled, the Chris is Christrina, and Law is W-A-U-G-H. And all I have on her is that they were married in 1787. Let's see. All of the children of Michael of John Garner were John, Michael, George, Louis, Christina, and Sally. And let's see what else is on here. It says John Garner was a private in Captain Henry Darooch's company, and that's D-A-R-O-O-C-H''S, 3rd Company, 3rd Battalion, Bucks County Militia, under the command of William Roberts, Lieutenant Colonel, June 12, 1780. And I believe that's the extent of that information from that. One other thing I did gather on this, when we were talking about would be your grandmother on your father's side, it was Melanda, M-E-L-A-N-D-A, Lavalette, L-A-V-I-O-L-E-T-T-E.
She married Louis Ruppelard.
And she married Louis Ruppelard, right. So that's the extent of the information I have on the family history to date. And we'll go back to Mother and talk a little bit to her about, what was it you mentioned that you might want to talk about? Do you like to talk about the Depression a little bit? And,
I'd like to talk about coming from Milwaukee to Creston. That was a change.
Well, in 1928, my husband's health was failing, and the doctor told me he should get employment outdoors. His lungs weren't very good, and so he decided he wanted an oil station. He'd be outdoors, and he'd like to be out with people. So he came here. We came here in early summer, and he contracted and built and bought a lot on the corner of Sycamore and Buckeye. And then he contracted a contractor who built the station, and he went back to Milwaukee. Then I think we made a trip in July, and then we went back to Milwaukee, and then in August 1929, we moved here permanently. And we rented a house just south of our station, of the station. And of course, that was his life's work for the rest of his life, which he enjoyed very much because he liked the public, and he liked to meet the public and was very friendly. And in 1959, he retired. He was 65 years old, and he sold his oil station. And my daughter and husband were living in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we took a trip there by train. And the boys, of course, were at home. They were in school. And well, we did quite a little traveling. We went to New York. We went to Virginia first, after Ronald was in the Army. And then we, from Virginia, went to New York to visit his sister, Clara Ritter, and husband. Stayed there a week, and then we came back. We went to California several times. We did quite a little traveling, those 10 years of his retirement. And of course, the last year of his life, he wasn't too well, so we didn't do any traveling. And he passed away May 10th, 1970.
Was it tough to get a loan back in the Depression days? How did he finance the station? Did he know a banker?
We had savings, and we had enough savings to pay for the lot. I remember. I remember going to the Building and Loan Association in Milwaukee to get that savings.
Yeah.
And I was sharing in my boots because I was carrying $1,500. And of course, I came home in the streetcar, you know, and
Yeah.
thought, gee, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Of course, Art was working till the very last day, you know. And then we did find a real estate man by the name of Walter Spriggs that loaned us money. And
That's interesting, because you had insurance with him for many, many years
yeah,
afterwards, didn't you? I didn't realize that he loaned you money.
And I remember times were so tough that if we paid $100 on our loan, we were doing well. So that it wasn't very easy. But we always had plenty to eat and a pretty good place to sleep to live in, so.
Always had a big garden.
Oh yes, we raised a very, very big garden. The people that back of us were in California, and they let us use their grounds for raising things. And we raised a lot of potatoes and everything else, really. And they had a lot of fruit there. They had raspberries. I remember picking gallons of raspberries. And we had a little strawberry patch. And then my husband had a lot south of his station that was vacant, so we put in a big patch of strawberries there. And one year we raised almost 500 quarts and sold them. And of course we used quite a bit too.
What year was it that the station was moved from here down to the highway? They changed the highway on us.
Yeah.
That was
Well, Ron was
Whoa.
a baby,
yeah.
and Jerry was not born yet.
Was that?
Be about 1936, don't you
Yeah,
think?
35 or 36 must have been.
Yes, he had to move the station. The highway moved from one location to another, and so our business fell so badly that we had to move. We were here 1 year without having highway traffic, and that was very hard on us.
Yeah.
So he bought a lot there and moved the station,
Put it on skids and
put it on skids,
moved it there.
Of course,
Which meant more debt.
Yeah.
yes, it was more. But we were very, very thrifty. We just, if we owed anything, we just didn't buy anything but really the necessities of life, you know. We made do. I remember Delores needed a winter coat, and she had a nice little summer coat that she had worn one year, and I had an old beaver coat, beaver fur coat. You remember that?
Muskrat.
Muskrat,
Mhm.
yeah,
I sure do.
muskrat. And so I took the best belts from the muskrat and lined that little summer coat. Didn't I do that? Or a fur,
Yes,
and a fur collar?
yes.
And it was just the swellest little coat, you know, and warm.
Warm.
Mm-hmm. In those days, the
Very
girls,
fashionable.
in those days, the girls didn't wear Levi's or jeans or trousers. They wore skirts.
Yeah.
And of course, that meant that you had to be dressed pretty warm. And so,
We weren't any worse off than most people.
yeah, we had a lot of company
Mhm.
as far as, because hogs were selling at about 5 cents a pound.
Mhm.
And I remember that so well. And gas was, how many, 5 gallons worth of $1 or something like that. A lot of people would be just buying $1 worth, you know.
Tomatoes were 50 cents a bushel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
But we did have nice strawberries that year, several years, and we sold them at a pretty good price. We had a lot of customers because it was on the highway and people would see those nice berries and stop picking. Then one year Dad raised potatoes, and he had good luck with his potatoes too, and we sold a lot of potatoes.
I can remember helping him plant potatoes.
Yeah.
Row after row
Mhm.
of potatoes.
When he dug them, you know, I picked them up, and we'd have a bushel basket there, and really you didn't have to move your bushel basket. You know, there was enough potato that would fill that basket in an instant almost. So, it was very productive. And then, of course, he had a lot of farmers, customers, and they were hard up too, and they'd bring us chickens to pay for gas, or eggs, or meat. And, of course, we needed all that for our groceries, you know. But really, we didn't buy a lot of bought stuff. We didn't buy TV dinners. That was unheard of course.
Then during the war, gasoline was rationed.
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
I remember
gas was
those
rationed,
cards.
and you had to have stamps to have gasoline,
But actually it did better then. Sold more gas.
I suppose.
Yeah.
But we managed, and we managed to get out of debt, and
And raised 3 kids.
raised 3 children.
2 went to college.
Right.
I think the birth of our boys cost us about $25 a piece, and you know what and my doctor would always stop when he went by here, and he'd buy gas from Dad, you know. That's the way people operated, used to, you know.
Yeah.
They'd help each other.
And I was born at home, and Ron was born at home.
Right here,
In the front bedroom.
Ron was born June 11th.
Yeah.
And that was just strawberry time. Oh, I had pick and not pick, I had, our brother brought us strawberries from the farm. He raised a lot of strawberries. And the day before, he brought us a lot of strawberries, I think a crate or 2. And I had to get rid of them. I clean them, and I had canned strawberries. And I remember I worked strawberries, and then I also baked bread before he was born. My regular doctor was on vacation. He really went to Colorado for his daughter's graduation. So I had a substitute doctor, which I wasn't very happy about. And it was a very difficult birth, so it didn't make it very nice for me. But I remember he was eating strawberries and fresh bread with Dad in the kitchen, you know.
Yeah.
It was in labor.
Yeah.
But he stayed right here. He stayed all night.
Yeah.
He became a very good friend of my dad's too, of Art, my husband. They went hunting together, and they really got to be pals. And you know, when his wife died, he wanted Dad to be pallbearer so bad.
Yeah.
And he couldn't locate Dad. Dad was always gone or someplace.
Yeah.
But I found that out afterwards, and Dr. Beatty had been here a number of times to call him and everything.
Yeah, we didn't go to hospitals as much.
Oh,
I
no.
remember that when I had my tonsils out, I went to the doctor's office,
Mhm.
and they took them out,
Right.
and then I went home. Yeah.
Well, I think with Ronald, we took him to the hospital. And I stayed there all night in the room with him. They brought me a cot. And I stayed there all night with him. Both boys had bad tonsils,
Mm-hmm.
young. And two, you had an infection in the groin that had to be lanced.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
That was bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing, Jerry had one summer, he was going barefooted, and he stepped on a bee outside. Well, the bee left a stinger in the foot. You remember that?
Yeah, I think we took one stinger out, but there was another one in
Oh,
there.
boy.
And it kept infecting, you know. We'd clean it out, we thought we had everything. We cleaned it out, and finally we did get all of it. What did we do with it? Something a little more drastic anyway.
We found
And
another stinger.
We got all of it, and then it healed up.
Yeah. Yeah, but it'd get better and then it'd get worse. And it'd get better and get worse. Yeah.
I
People
think-
grunted things out more. They didn't run to the doctor with everything.
Right.
I remember
remember-
Dad had a infected foot. Remember that?
Yeah.
Oh, terrible. And they didn't know what was gonna happen. It looked awful. Somebody told them to put an onion poultice on it.
Huh.
And you cut up onions and put it on all night, and the next morning it was a lot better.
Really?
Huh.
It's supposed to draw the poison out. Don't you remember that? Oh, that was terrible. Because we thought he was gonna have to go to the hospital and lose his foot.
Hmm. I remember Dr. Beatty telling Art that he had a workshop. He loved to refurbish furniture and build things, and he says, you know, I have so much spare time that, you know, that's what the doctors did, and that's
Yeah.
sort of a hobby, you know.
Yeah. Non-commercial.
Well, I've talked myself out, haven't I?
Well, okay, we'll shut her down for a little while and see if we can think of some other things. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, this is late on a snowy afternoon on a Friday, December 30th, 1983. Bob and I are here visiting Jerry, and Mom is here from Creston. And we've just come home from a lovely lunch in which Jerry's kids were there, Mom, Bob, and I. We went to Mother Tucker's where Jenny works.
And ate too much.
And we all ate too much. It was lovely. We thought we'd give you a little history of Bob and my family for posterity. So we have some dates we might give you. As we said in our previous interview, I guess, that I made last May, Bob and I got married on August 14th, 1949 in Iowa City, Iowa, with all families in attendance. And,
After having dated through college for a couple of years.
right. Bob had just gotten his BA, I'd just gotten my MA. And neither of us had any sort of job, but Bob had been admitted to the University of Minnesota for graduate work, leading toward a PhD in psychology. So his parents gave us an old Nash secondhand car they had bought for us,
Yeah, I remember that.
and my parents gave us $100.
Both of which were very necessary for our trip to Minneapolis.
Minneapolis.
So we got married and
Set off with our worldly possessions.
set off with everything in the car and got about 30 miles before we stopped for the night and then went on to Minneapolis. And over the next few days, after driving into Wisconsin to visit an uncle of mine and generally seeing the sights before we went to school and back to work in Minneapolis.
We arrived in Minneapolis, and Bob had a cousin who had a home across the street from the field house at the University of Minnesota. Her husband was going to law school, and she had a young family. they rented out rooms to students, and this was August, so the rooms were empty, and we were welcome to stay with them until we found a place of our own.
Which was pretty nice because we didn't have any money.
So, well, we had a little money
We
to
had a
get
little money.
started, and Bob had saved his money through the years. He had a little stash. And so anyway, I got a job teaching school in a Lutheran school, and
In St. Paul.
in St. Paul, and Bob landed a teaching assistant job at the university. My salary was $175 a month, and Bob's was $25 a month. So we had the grand total of $200 a month, which wasn't bad in those days.
And we had a one-room apartment for $35 a month until a little while later, about a year later, we moved into an apartment with living room, bedroom, kitchen, and we shared a bath with just a lady that lived on the second floor with us.
This was a great improvement over the
This is a
previous.
big improvement over the one room where we shared a bath with 14 boys.
So we spent the next several years working, both of us. Bob was promoted and made more money at the university and did very well in graduate school. And after teaching school for a year, I decided I preferred office work. I went to work for General Motors, and I really enjoyed it. And I made better money than I had teaching. And we enjoyed ourselves in Minneapolis.
Made lots of friends.
Had lots of friends. Went to the movies for entertainment or played cards with friends. And actually postponed having our family till Bob was almost through with his work at the University of Minnesota. Then he landed his first job teaching at Wayne State University for the magnificent sum of $5,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And
Then we loaded all of our possessions into our brand new 1937 Nash.
no, Pontiac. By then, honey,
Oh.
we'd bought a Pontiac.
Oh, that's right, we had our
Yeah,
Pontiac by
19
that time, right? We'd gone
53
through the
Pontiac.
Nash and the Hudson Terraplane that we got from my dad on our wedding. And Dee Dee got the Pontiac from a dealer for a good price. So we had a brand new car, and we loaded up all of our stuff into our brand new car. And at that time, Dee Dee was pregnant, and we went to Detroit. And I started teaching in the fall of 1953. And I got my PhD in the spring of '54. And I had to fly back and finish up my thesis first, and then fly back for my final oral examinations. And then I taught at Wayne for 4 years, and both of our kids were married or were born in Detroit, born in the same hospital, right, Dee?
And in 1954, March 26th, and Alan, June 10th, 1956. However, I think we were a little restless. We really didn't like Detroit that much. And I remember one Sunday looking in the newspaper, and they were looking for somebody with Bob's qualifications. Really, he was into human engineering then, in Albuquerque. So we both thought about it and talked about it, and he went down for an interview. And that's sort of how we got on the trail west. Bob went to Albuquerque. And I think he describes it better when he talks about walking off the plane. your sinuses drying
Oh,
up. That's
yeah.
always your favorite story about
Right.
going from Detroit on a terrible day that
Well,
I
it was a
drove.
bad day in Detroit, and it was raining, and Dee Dee had to drive me 35 miles in the rain to get on the plane in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And I flew to Albuquerque, and I had sort of a head cold. And when I got off the plane, the sun was shining, and the sky was blue, and it was dry. Humidity was low, and I really fell in love with the place before I was ever there on the job interview. And so then I quit the teaching job at the end of the year, and we moved to Albuquerque and built a nice home there, and loved the home and the area very much, and the city.
We had relatives, your
Yeah.
relatives,
Yeah,
McCornacks lived
I had a
there.
cousin living there, and they were very nice and made us feel very much at home in the new city. And but the job was poor, and so I had a friend who I was teaching with in Detroit who had gotten a job in Santa Monica, California. And she said that she thought that I would very much like the kind of job she had, or similar to it, in a computer software training company, System Development Corporation in Santa Monica. So I went out there for an interview, and then we moved to Los Angeles.
We pulled up stakes again. We really hated to leave Albuquerque. We
Yeah.
really didn't want to leave. We had a nice home and friends. And, but I guess we always sort of had itchy feet a little bit, so we thought it was worth it. We went to Los Angeles, and things worked out quite well there. Bob was there for 9 years, the same job, same company. And again, we built a home, and unfortunately, it was near the airport. And then the defense business sort of went downward. He had a number of friends leaving his company, and I think he was ready to go back to the academic life. And so he went on another job interview, this time to San Diego. You might tell what happened.
Well, let's see. Yeah, I'd spent about 9 years at SDC doing statistical consulting and getting into computers for the first time. So that was good background for my job at San Diego State University, which I took in '68. And we went down in the spring, and much against my will, Dee Dee bought a house.
Bob wanted to rent, being the cautious
I
type.
thought I'd be cautious and rent for a year to see if I really would like the job. But Dee thought it would be best if we just went ahead and bought a house that we'd seen and that she liked, well, that we all liked. So we bought the house, and Dee and Ann and Alan moved down to San Diego and painted the house and fixed it all up. And I stayed back in Playa del Rey and went to work every day. Drove down to San Diego on the weekends once in a while, but throughout the summer I was trying to sell a house up in Los Angeles, and Dee was fixing up the new house in San Diego.
You never did
The
sell that
house never did sell. We thought we had it sold a couple of times, but the house
Couldn't
never.
sell that house, darn it.
The house never did sell, and so we rented it out for I think about 6 or 7 years. And then finally a number of people were suing the airport for inverse condemnation of their property by making it impossible to sell the house because of the airplane noise and continued encroachment of the airplanes and new runways built ever closer to our house. So anyway, the airport finally bought our house from us, and we took that money and bought an apartment building. Actually, we bought two.
We did a lot with that money. We went to Europe, we bought a new Mercedes.
Yeah.
We bought 2 apartment buildings,
Yeah.
one about 6 months apart or thereabouts. And we sort of found ourselves in a little second career, second business.
Mom and Pop.
We're mom and popping in the apartment business, and it's turned out very well. Of course, the whole economy's been in our favor while we were doing this. Just so happens, I guess we're lucky.
Right.
But in the meantime, Bob has spent many years at San Diego State. I think it's
15.
15 years now, and we're still in the same house that I wanted to buy and he didn't want to buy. And we haven't done everything well, but we have enjoyed our real estate associations. I did get my real estate license, and I did go to work at absolutely the nadir,
The worst
the
time.
worst time for real estate. But I learned a lot. I had fun, and it hasn't done me any harm.
Made some friends.
Made some friends. But I've gone back to just being the apartment overseer with Bob.
Backup plumber.
Backup plumber and backup everything. And backing me up sometimes almost physically when things have gotten a little rough with people. But we've enjoyed it. Our kids have grown and flown. Alan is an electronic technician. He's up north. And Ann has had many careers. She's married, and right now she's working in an insurance office. And Bob and I have traveled quite a bit. That's been one of the nice little side advantages of his type of work. He can take off at sort of odd times of the year when countries aren't so crowded. And we've traveled quite a bit in the United States. We've also had marvelous trips to Greece, Italy, England, and Europe in general. And we're planning to go again this spring to Spain. I've been studying Spanish for 4 years. And I think I can get us in and out of the country and around fairly well, if they'll have the grace to understand my Spanish. And so I would say we've had quite a pleasant life in many respects, and we've been fortunate. And we've been married for, it will be 35 years. Do you have anything else to say, or you want to comment on that?
No, that's right, about 35. Soon.
And we've just had a marvelous visit here. We've, I don't know, it just was sort of an impulse this year. I thought, gee, it would be nice to be back here at Christmas time with family. And so we did it. And we've had the worst weather.
We've set records for cold weather.
It has been so cold. It was so cold, Jerry's car wouldn't start in Creston. We walked to the grocery store. Fortunately, there's one nearby. And Mom's house is snug as a bug. It's very warm. But it was fiercely cold. And we were dressed for it, and we've enjoyed it immensely. And we've enjoyed being in Omaha, too. And can highly recommend a number of restaurants here. We're going to go home about 10 pounds heavier than when we came. And it's been great. It's been just lovely.
Yeah. Jerry's been a nice
Yeah,
host and
had a
shown
good
us
host.
around. And we've had a nice visit, both Creston and Omaha.
I think it's meant a lot to Mom too. She's really enjoyed it.
Mhm.
And, so I guess this about concludes our comments.
Tomorrow you're flying home.
Tomorrow we're flying home.
Tomorrow morning,
Uh-huh.
bright and early, we fly home.